My millionaire son gave his mother-in-law a $200,000 ranch. For my birthday, he handed me a $30,000 cabin and a note. Sorry, Mom. I'm busy. But what I discovered in the backyard made my phone light up with 35 missed calls. I'm so glad you're here. Stay with me until the end, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. I stood in front of the small wooden cabin, keys shaking in my hand. Quinn had passed them to me with the enthusiasm of handing off a receipt. The place looked decent enough at a glance. But compared to the sprawling $200,000 ranch he gifted Sandra, his mother-in-law, just 2 months ago, this felt more like a formality than a heartfelt gesture. Happy 66th birthday to me, I murmured under my breath, the wind whispering through the pines around me. The short note he'd included was still burning a hole in my coat pocket. Sorry, Mom. I'm busy. Hope you like it. Quinn. Busy. That single word carried 1,000 cuts. Too busy to come to my birthday dinner. Too busy to call. But not too busy to help Sandra move into her custom-built ranch with a guest house, stables, and a wraparound porch. I saw every smiling photo before she blocked me on Facebook. There he was, arm around her like she was the only mother he'd ever known. My fingers struggled with the lock, arthritis turning a simple twist into a chore. The door groaned open, revealing a small, freshly painted interior that smelled like artificial pine and effort. A basic setup. Couch, kitchenette, 1 bed, 1 bath. Neat. Functional. Impersonal. I put my purse down on the little dining table, feeling a heavy lump in my chest. 38 years of raising him on my own, and this was my thanks? A budget cabin that felt more like a consolation than a celebration. Quinn had become a millionaire, and I'd sacrificed everything to help him get there. I looked out the back window. Behind the modest lawn, memories began to flood in. Quinn crying at age 8 when kids teased his hand-me-downs. Me pulling double shifts at the diner just to buy him new sneakers. Skipping meals so he wouldn't have to skip field trips. Taking out a second mortgage when he begged to join his high school class trip to Europe. Pretending it was nothing, even as I worried every night about how I'd pay for it. At 22, he graduated business school completely debt-free. I remember standing in the crowd, my waitress uniform still smelling like fried food. He caught my eye, mouthed, "Thank you, Mom." For one beautiful moment, it all felt worth it. But somewhere along the way, that grateful boy turned into a man who could toss his mother a cabin key like he was tossing out junk mail. I scrolled through our recent texts, barely a handful of words from him. One-word replies, or worse, silence. Meanwhile, his social feeds were full of joyful dinners with Sandra, vacations with Monica, his wife, and birthday parties with balloons, cakes, and laughter. Everyone except me. Sandra's gift was 6 times more expensive. She got a full weekend of family bonding. I got a key and a rushed note. It stung. I dropped into the armchair by the window. My bones ached from the long drive, but what ached more was knowing I'd become background noise in my own son's life. My phone buzzed. For a split second, hope rose. Maybe he was calling to explain. Maybe there was more to the story. Maybe it was just my neighbor. Do you want help clearing out your old place now that you've moved? Moved? Had everyone already decided this was my new home? Just like that? I was expected to smile, be grateful, and shrink quietly into the small space that mirrored the space I now held in my son's life. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should be glad he remembered it all. But something about all this felt wrong. Deeply wrong. Quinn had always been careful with money, but never unkind. The boy I raised would have shown up. This Quinn, this man felt like a stranger pretending to be my son. With a sigh, I stood up slowly, knees stiff from the trip. I figured I might as well explore what I'd been given, even if it felt like a hand-me-down in a shiny box. The bedroom was small, but neat, with a window that looked out into the woods. The bathroom had clearly been updated recently. The kitchen was cramped but usable. Everything was fine. Fine for an old woman who, apparently, should know her place. As I opened drawers and checked cabinets, taking stock of what was included in this gift, I couldn't help but run the numbers in my head. Something didn't quite make sense. Quinn had insisted his business was under strain, that finances were tight, that he simply couldn't contribute to my growing medical expenses. Yet somehow, in the span of a year, he had managed to purchase both this modest cabin and a $200,000 ranch for Sandra, his mother-in-law. So either the business had miraculously rebounded, or he'd been lying all along. Standing alone in that cabin, surrounded by the smell of new paint and old deceptions, something inside me shifted. The mother who had always found excuses for her son's neglect started to grow weary. The woman who'd sacrificed her health, youth, and security so her son could chase his dreams was beginning to ask questions I probably should have asked a long time ago. Outside, the sun slipped lower behind the tree line, casting long shadows across the tiny backyard. Tomorrow, I'd begin unpacking, trying to make this cabin feel like home. But tonight, I sat in the fading light, wondering when exactly I had stopped being Quinn's mother, and started being his obligation. What I didn't know then was that the truth I'd been searching for was buried right outside that window. And it was about to change everything. 3 days into living there, I had settled into a routine that felt like pretending. Morning coffee at sunrise. Walks through the tiny yard. Quiet evenings with a book by the window. It was peaceful in a way that made me feel disconnected from the world. Safe, but stifling. Like I was wrapped in cotton and set aside. I was organizing the closet in the bedroom when I noticed something strange. The back wall didn't seem to match the dimensions of the cabin's exterior. When I pressed on a section of the wood paneling, it gave slightly. I pried at it, and a hidden space opened behind a loose board. My heart pounded as I pulled out a dusty cardboard box, the kind used to store important paperwork. On top was a label written in Robert's handwriting, unmistakable after all these years. For Blanche. Life insurance. Only open if something happens to me. I could barely breathe. Robert had died 15 years ago. I thought everything had been settled. Quinn had taken care of all the paperwork back then. I was too deep in grief to handle it myself. He'd told me Robert hadn't maintained any life insurance, that he'd let the policy lapse because we couldn't afford it. But here it was. The truth. Staring back at me. Inside the box was a life insurance policy worth $450,000 with me listed as the only beneficiary. Records showed every premium had been paid, right up until Robert's death. And then there were letters. Correspondence between Quinn and the insurance company. My stomach turned as I read. 3 weeks after Robert's funeral, Quinn had contacted the insurer, presenting himself as my financial representative. He'd submitted a document claiming I had authorized him to manage the payout on my behalf. The signature looked like mine, but I had no memory of signing such a thing. According to the letters, the entire payout had been deposited into an account Quinn set up for my protection. The justification? I was emotionally unstable and not capable of handling the money responsibly. The correspondence claimed I'd requested the funds be invested long-term with Quinn in control, until I was ready. I never made such a request. I didn't even know the money existed. My knees buckled and I collapsed into the chair beside the closet, clutching the papers like they might dissolve if I let go. 15 years ago, while I was working myself to exhaustion trying to afford Robert's funeral, working 3 jobs to keep the lights on in our tiny house, my son had been quietly sitting on nearly $500,000, my money. Money that was legally and morally mine. I remembered those months vividly. The despair. The fear. Quinn had seemed so helpful, so concerned. He'd offered to take over my bills, insisted I let him manage things. Told me not to worry. Said we'd figure it out. He had the solution the whole time, he just chose not to tell me. And then I found the most damning piece yet, an investment statement. The funds had indeed grown. Over $800,000 now sat in an account. But not one in my name. The account was registered under a family trust with Quinn listed as the sole controller. He held the keys to a fortune that belonged to me, and had been using my supposed vulnerability as his justification. The final documents in the box revealed more of the same. Bank statements. Investment growth reports. Emails with a financial advisor who believed he was helping a wealthy client care for his elderly, emotionally fragile mother. I was painted as a dependent. Someone who needed looking after. Someone who couldn't possibly manage her own affairs. Quinn had spent the last 15 years profiting from my grief, and keeping me in the dark to do it. While I'd been scraping by on Social Security and what little savings I had left, I'd sometimes swallowed my pride and asked Quinn for help with unexpected expenses. He'd offer it reluctantly, always with a sigh or a sideways comment that left me feeling ashamed for needing anything at all. At the bottom of the box was one final envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, Robert's unmistakable script looping across the page. My eyes blurred as I read his words. My dearest Blanche. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there. I know how much you've always worried about money, so I want you to know I took care of things. The life insurance will give you stability, and maybe even a chance to travel like we used to dream. Don't ever let anyone tell you you're not capable. You are the strongest woman I've ever known. This money is yours, and you've earned every cent. Live boldly, love deeply. You deserve joy. All my love. Robert. I pressed the letter to my chest and broke down, the sobs rising from somewhere I didn't know existed anymore. Not just for Robert, though I missed him more than words, but for everything I'd lost over the last 15 years. 15 years of penny pinching, of physical strain from jobs I was too old to be doing, of quietly swallowing my shame for being a burden to my generous son. 15 years of living in fear and scarcity, while the truth sat hidden in a box behind a wall. What gutted me most was remembering all the times I'd thanked Quinn. The times I'd apologized for asking too much, told him I'd understand if he couldn't help. He'd taken my gratitude and guilt without blinking, while secretly holding the money that could have changed my life. The cabin, once seen as a modest gift, now felt like something else entirely. This wasn't generosity. This was control. Quinn hadn't given me a place to live, he'd placed me somewhere quiet and manageable. Somewhere far from his real life. The cost of the cabin was probably less than what he spent each month on Sandra's expenses, and it came with the added bonus of keeping me isolated. I looked around the room again. It didn't feel like a retirement haven anymore, it felt like a holding cell for an aging mother he didn't want to deal with. Just enough comfort to avoid guilt. Just enough distance to forget I was even here. My phone sat untouched on the counter. No missed calls. No check-ins. No, how are you settling in, Mom? Why would there be? As far as Quinn was concerned, he'd handled me. Tucked me away so he could get back to his real life, with the people who actually mattered. I moved to the kitchen window and stared out at the darkening tree line. Somewhere beyond that, Sandra was probably hosting another dinner in her expansive ranch home, surrounded by Quinn, Monica, and my grandchildren, kids who barely knew I existed. I could picture it. Monica bragging about her loving husband, Sandra praising her thoughtful son-in-law, while I sat here like some forgotten artifact of a life they no longer wanted to include. Only I wasn't forgotten. I'd been silenced. And for the first time in 15 years, I saw the truth clearly. The only question left was, what was I going to do about it? The next morning, I went to the town library and asked a kind young woman to show me how to use the computers. I spent hours digging into the details of what Quinn had done, and what I found made my stomach churn. The money hadn't just been tucked away in an investment account growing quietly. Quinn had been draining it, funding his life from the very thing meant to give me security. Big withdrawals lined up perfectly with purchases I'd seen on social media, a down payment on their new house, Monica's luxury SUV, tuition for the kids' elite private school. All of it paid for with my future. But the worst part wasn't the money, it was the messages. Buried deep in the inbox of an old email account Robert had once set up were auto-forwarded statements and a collection of emails that shook me to the core. In one, Monica wrote, "Your mother called again, whining about her electric bill. How long are we supposed to keep pretending we care? She's so needy. It's honestly pathetic." Quinn had replied, "I know, but we have to be careful. If she ever finds out about the insurance payout, we're screwed. I'll send her $200 and make her feel bad for asking. That usually shuts her down." Another exchange from just last month. "Monica, she sent Emma another birthday card with $20 in it. I threw it out. I don't want the kids growing up thinking that kind of poverty is normal." Quinn, "Good move. I've been thinking, we should start cutting back visits. The cabin was a good buffer. Maybe just holidays from now on. Less contact means less guilt." Monica, agreed. "Honestly, with her health, how much longer do we have to keep this up anyway? That money should be ours. We're the ones raising a family." I sat there in the library, surrounded by quiet clicks of keyboards and hushed page turns, as my entire world fractured. They weren't just spending what was mine, they were rewriting me. Painting me as a senile, pitiful woman unfit to be in her own grandchildren's lives. All to justify their theft. The emails were filled with casual cruelty. Quinn describing my calls for help as emotional manipulation, my efforts to buy thoughtful gifts as guilt-tripping. In one message, after I'd mentioned feeling isolated, he wrote, "She's getting clingy again. We need to be firmer about setting boundaries." They had taken my money. They had erased my dignity. And now they were reshaping my identity to justify it all. But what they didn't count on was me finally fighting back. Maybe he thought that forcing her to fend for herself would teach her some resilience. "Independence," he said, as he quietly severed every tie to the support I'd need to actually have it. He didn't want me self-sufficient, he wanted me invisible. Digging deeper, I found transcripts of discussions with their financial advisor. Turns out, Quinn had been working on transferring the life insurance into a generational trust, meant to benefit his children. Not a penny would have been available to me, not even in a crisis. He had the gall to frame it as protecting family assets from future healthcare costs and securing the kids' future. What he was really doing was diverting my inheritance into his own legacy, erasing me from the equation entirely. The most infuriating discovery came from a recent email thread between him and Monica about the cabin. At first, she'd been livid about the expense, but Quinn reassured her with calculated logic. "The cabin hits multiple targets. It gets her out of our daily life so the kids don't have to absorb her neediness. It's cheap enough not to mess with our actual investments. Best of all, it looks like a generous gesture. If she ever uncovers the insurance money, we'll just point to the cabin and say we've been supporting her the whole time." Monica replied, "Genius. And if her health declines, we can always say she wanted solitude. Nobody can fault us for honoring her independence." They had it all planned out. The cabin wasn't a kindness, it was a legal alibi. A future prop in the story they'd built to justify years of theft and emotional abandonment. Before the library closed, I printed every document I could find. My fingers trembled as I fed coins into the copy machine, each page another blow to the illusion I'd clung to. By the time I returned to the cabin, I had a thick folder in my passenger seat, evidence of a betrayal so elaborate and cold it barely seemed real. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table and really saw my life, clearer than I ever had in 15 years. I'd been living like someone grateful for crumbs. Apologizing for needing help. Breaking my back working menial jobs while my millionaire son lived large on money that had been meant for me. I thought about every doctor appointment I'd postponed because I couldn't cover the copay. About the car I'd patched together with duct tape and prayers. About nights eating peanut butter on stale bread so I could scrape together enough for birthday cards or Christmas gifts, offerings to grandchildren who'd been taught I was something to be pitied. And all the while, Quinn had been funding private school tuition, lavish vacations, and a lifestyle that let him pose as a responsible, high-powered provider. Meanwhile, his wife looked down on the poor, tired woman who happened to be the reason he existed. My phone sat on the counter, silent as ever. No messages. No check-ins. No "how's it going, Mom?" Because in their minds, the Blanche problem had been handled. Neatly filed away in a forest cabin, too far to be a nuisance and just close enough to maintain plausible deniability. But as I sat there, surrounded by proof of their lies, I felt something shift. I wasn't the fragile woman they imagined, wasn't the desperate, clinging figure they whispered about behind closed doors. I was 66 years old. I had raised a son completely on my own. I had worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs at a time. I had survived loss, loneliness, and the grinding wear of poverty. They thought they'd beaten me. But I was still standing. And I was done being quiet. The question now wasn't if they had stolen from me, that part was crystal clear. The real question was, how long had this plan been unfolding behind my back? And what other truths had they buried to keep their comfortable life intact? As if summoned by the weight of that realization, my phone buzzed. Quinn's name lit up on the screen. For 15 years, I would have picked up instantly. Grateful for even a sliver of attention from my high-achieving son. Not tonight. I let it ring. Watched the call go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. I sat still, watching the screen without blinking. Nobody calls their mother 35 times unless something has gone seriously wrong with their little narrative. I turned the phone off and smiled to myself. Let him wonder. Let him panic. For the first time in over a decade, Quinn was going to have to wait for me. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. The screen lit up with 47 missed calls and 18 voicemails, all from Quinn. The urgency in his voice told me everything. Whatever had jolted Quinn into remembering he had a mother, it wasn't love. The first few voicemails sounded like classic Quinn, controlled, mildly irritated at being ignored. "Mom, it's me. Call me when you get this." But by voicemail number 7, his polished tone had cracked. "Mom, where are you? I stopped by the cabin and your car was gone. Please call. It's important." By number 12, desperation had crept in. "I need to speak with you right now. It's serious. I'm worried." The final message was almost incoherent. "Please, Mom. I'm begging you. Pick up. We need to talk, in person. I'm coming over." I was still listening when I heard a car door slam outside. I glanced out the window and watched Quinn approaching with a tight, anxious stride, his jaw clenched in a way I'd never seen before. Monica trailed behind him, clutching her designer handbag like a shield and glancing around the humble property with a look of poorly concealed disdain. I didn't rush to open the door. When I finally did, Quinn brushed past me without so much as a greeting, eyes scanning the cabin like he expected to find something missing or damaged. "Thank God, Mom. Where were you yesterday?" I was worried sick. His performance might have moved me, if I hadn't just read months of emails where he and Monica had plotted exactly how much longer they'd have to put up with me. I watched him pace the small room, his gaze flicking repeatedly toward the bedroom. "I was at the library," I said evenly. "Doing a little research." Monica gave a soft, condescending laugh. "The library? Oh, Blanche, if you'd said you wanted to read, we could have gotten you a tablet. Much more convenient." Her patronizing tone was so familiar it nearly passed unnoticed, like background noise you've learned to ignore. But now, I heard it clearly, as if my ears had finally tuned in. "So tell me, Quinn," I said, settling into my chair slowly, deliberately, "what was so urgent you needed to call me 47 times?" He froze, halfway through a step. 47, he echoed. I just wanted to check in. Make sure everything was okay." "Since when?" That question lingered like smoke. He cycled through a few expressions: surprise, hurt, confusion, before settling on a feigned sincerity. I always check on you. No, you don't. My voice was calm. Steady. You haven't called once since dropping off the keys. You skipped my last birthday. I haven't been invited to a single family dinner in over 2 years. So I'll ask again, what's the emergency? Monica stepped forward, flashing a smile with edges. Blanche, let's not turn this into drama. Quinn has been incredibly kind. This cabin alone cost us $30,000. Most people would be grateful. Most people, I repeated. How much did your mother's ranch cost? The smile twitched. That's different. My mother needed space for her horses. And I need space for what, exactly? Silence. Quinn cleared his throat, trying a different tactic. Mom, you sound upset. Just tell us what's going on. We're here to listen. I looked at him, at this man wearing my son's face, who had been draining my resources for 15 years while convincing himself he was doing me a favor. The boy who once cried at his graduation and mouthed thank you across the stage had become a stranger who could lie to my face without blinking. I came across some files, I said finally. They were tucked away in the bedroom. Left behind by your father. The ones you told me didn't exist. Quinn went still. Not a word. But his eyes flicked toward Monica, just for a fraction of a second. They'd practiced this moment. Monica jumped in. Oh, sweetheart, those old papers? Quinn, didn't you explain the insurance to her? Quinn nodded slowly, like he was preparing to give a child bad news. Mom, I did take care of all that, after Dad died. You were overwhelmed. You asked me to handle the finances. No, I said, sharply. I never asked you to take care of anything. You were grieving, Monica offered, voice syrupy with fake compassion. Quinn just didn't want to stress you out. That money's been invested all this time, for your benefit. For my future? I repeated, not bothering to hide my disbelief. Where exactly is it now? Quinn sat down across from me, adopting the wide-eyed look he used to wear as a kid when he broke something valuable. It's in a safe investment account. I've been managing it. Making sure it grows. I was waiting for the right moment to transition it back to you. 15 years wasn't the right moment? He leaned in, voice soothing. Mom, you have to understand, it's a lot of money. I wanted to be sure you were ready to handle that kind of responsibility. There it was. The patronizing certainty in his voice. The same script he'd probably told himself over and over, that I wasn't capable. That I was too old, too scattered, too soft to manage what was mine. That stealing was protecting me. It made my stomach turn. And what about the withdrawals? I asked, voice quiet but unwavering. The ones that paid for your new house, Monica's luxury car, the kids' private school? Quinn's face drained of color. How do you? The internet's a beautiful thing, I replied. You'd be amazed what you can uncover when you know where to dig. Monica's polished mask slipped. You've been spying on us? I've been investigating what happened to my husband's life insurance, I said plainly. The one you told me never existed, while using it to bankroll your lifestyle. That's not how it happened, Quinn said quickly, grasping for control. Those were loans against the policy. I always meant to pay them back. With what money? And when, exactly? He didn't answer. He couldn't. We both knew he'd never planned to repay a single cent. Monica abruptly stood, white-knuckling her purse like it might shield her from the truth. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Quinn's handled everything responsibly. He's grown the money. He's grown it while I juggled 3 jobs just to afford your father's burial, I said flatly. While I skipped medications because I couldn't pay for them. While I apologized for asking help with groceries. Monica's tone turned sharp. Cold. That was your decision. No one told you to play the martyr. The words landed like acid. There it was, her real opinion. My suffering wasn't a tragedy, it was a performance. A choice. One that, in her eyes, deserved no sympathy. Quinn gave her a look, trying to silently pull her back, but the damage was done. "You're right," I said softly. "No one asked me to be a martyr. Just like no one asked you to steal from me." "We didn't steal," Monica snapped. "That money's been gaining interest for 15 years. You're actually better off than you would have been if you'd touched it." "Better off?" I rose slowly, my joints stiff but my spine straight. "Better off working part-time jobs in old age instead of enjoying the retirement my husband planned? Better off being treated like a burden by a son who's been living off money that was meant to support me?" Quinn reached for one last lifeline. "Mom, I know this looks bad, but you have to believe me, I was only trying to help." I looked at him for a long moment, searching for a flicker of the boy who used to hug me tight and swear he'd take care of me someday. But that boy was gone. Replaced by a man who had robbed his own mother and wrapped it in the language of protection. "I believe you believe that," I said. "I believe you convinced yourself I couldn't manage on my own. That I was too fragile, too foolish. So you helped me by stealing everything my husband left behind." His mouth opened, but I didn't give him the chance. "Get out." The words were harsher than I meant, but I didn't take them back. "Mom. Out of my house. Both of you." Monica looked like she might argue, but I raised a hand to stop her. "You've taken 15 years from me. Kept me away from my grandchildren because you were ashamed of the life you forced on me. Lied to me, controlled me, made me feel small, like I couldn't be trusted with what was mine. Get out." I walked to the door and opened it wide. They left. But at the threshold, Quinn turned back. "We need to fix this. As a family." I looked at him, really looked at him, one final time. "We stopped being family the moment you decided I was too stupid to handle the last thing your father ever gave me." After they drove off, I sank into the armchair. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt it, freedom. The phone rang again. But this time I knew exactly what to do. The next morning, I walked into the office of Margaret Chen, a lawyer who specializes in elder law. I'd found her after weeks of research. Her office was simple, professional. She listened carefully as I told her everything. When I finished, she sat back, reviewing the stack of documents I'd brought. "Mrs. Patterson," she said carefully, "what your son has done qualifies as financial elder abuse. It could also be considered fraud, and a violation of fiduciary duty. This power of attorney appears forged. And even if it weren't, he overstepped the moment he used your money for himself." I sat quietly across from her, oddly calm. My entire life for the past 15 years had been based on a lie. "What are my options?" "You have several," she replied. "We can demand immediate repayment with interest. We can press criminal charges. We can also pursue a civil case for damages, compensation for the hardship you've endured." She paused, her tone serious. "But I should warn you, going forward with this may end your relationship with your son for good. Most families don't survive something like this." "What relationship?" I asked, my voice like steel. "The one where I apologize for needing help while he bleeds me dry? Where I'm kept from my grandkids because I'm too poor to be presentable? That relationship died 15 years ago. I just hadn't buried it yet." Margaret nodded solemnly. "Then let's talk strategy." We spent the next 2 hours going over every detail. The forged document alone could lead to criminal charges. But the long-term pattern of financial manipulation told a bigger story, one of calculated control disguised as care. "There's one more thing," she added as the meeting wrapped up. "We can trace every dollar. The house. The car. The school tuition. Even the groceries. All of it was paid with money that belongs to you." The realization hit me like a blow. Everything. Everything they had was funded by my husband's life insurance, meant to secure my future. I thought about Monica's designer heels, the elite school, the European vacations, the social media photos of family smiles that never included me. All bought with money that should have been keeping me warm in old age. What happens when we file? The court will likely freeze their accounts. Anything that can be liquidated will be. The house may have to be sold. Vehicles repossessed. The children may need to switch schools. If Quinn's business relied on that money, it could collapse. I should have felt guilt. But I didn't. The woman I used to be, the old Blanche, might have wept over the idea of disrupting her grandchildren's lives. She'd have turned the blame inward, convincing herself she was the problem. But that woman was gone. And now, there were criminal charges on the table. In this state, financial elder abuse is a felony. If convicted, Quinn could spend real time behind bars. I drove home in silence, the weight of it all pressing down like a heavy snowfall. Cold, steady, inescapable. By the time I reached the cabin, I knew what I needed to do. That afternoon, I signed the documents authorizing Margaret to proceed with both civil and criminal action against my son. I gave her everything, photocopies of every form, every email, every thread of evidence showing exactly how I'd been deceived, used, and quietly robbed for over a decade. This won't move quickly, she warned. Your son will likely reach out. He may send others, family members, even friends, to guilt or pressure you into dropping the case. Let them try, I said. But we were both wrong about the timing. Quinn didn't wait. The very next morning, I woke to angry knocking at the door. I peeked through the front window. Quinn's car was in the driveway. But this time, he hadn't come alone. Monica stood next to him, stiff and furious. Two strangers flanked them. An older man in a polished suit and a woman carrying a sleek briefcase. Mom, Quinn called out, his voice shaky. Please, we need to talk. I brought my lawyer. We can work this out. I opened the door, but I didn't ask them in. Quinn looked awful, unshaven, wrinkled shirt, dark circles beneath his eyes. Monica was unreadable, her jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. The suited man stepped forward with a practiced, performative smile. Mrs. Patterson, I'm David Whitmore. I represent your son. I understand there's been some confusion regarding certain financial arrangements. I'd like to offer a calm, civil discussion. After all, this is a family matter. There's no confusion, I replied evenly. Your client stole my husband's life insurance and used it to bankroll his life for 15 years while leaving me in poverty. The woman with the briefcase stepped up next. Mrs. Patterson, I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'm a geriatric psychiatrist. Your son is worried about your mental well-being. These accusations you're making are inconsistent with your past behavior. Perhaps it would be wise to undergo an evaluation, just to be safe. Ah, I said. So now you want to declare me mentally incompetent. How convenient. Quinn's face collapsed. Mom, no. It's not like that. We're just concerned. You haven't been yourself. The stress, the isolation, maybe early memory issues, confusion. I'm not confused, I said coldly. I'm more clear-minded than I've been in 15 years. The lawyer jumped back in, his voice syrupy. Mrs. Patterson, lawsuits are expensive and emotionally draining. Surely we can come to a more amicable resolution. What if Quinn repaid the funds gradually? With interest, of course. And you'd receive a generous monthly stipend to guarantee your comfort. While he continues to control the rest of my money? I asked. No, thank you. Monica finally broke her silence. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with rage. You cruel, selfish old woman. Do you have any idea what you're doing to your grandchildren? Emma has friends at her school. Tyler made the baseball team. You want to destroy their lives, over money? Those words would have broken the old me. But I'd read Monica's emails. I'd seen her sneer behind my back, calling me useless and pitiful. I'd lived on scraps while she flaunted the inheritance meant to secure my future. I want what belongs to me, I said simply. What my husband left for my protection, not for your lifestyle. Those are your grandchildren, Monica hissed. Don't you even care about them? I care enough to teach them that theft has consequences. Quinn tried a new tactic. A threat. If you go through with this, you'll never see them again. Monica and I will keep them away from you, for good. His words hung heavy in the air. For 15 years, that fear, losing them, had kept me quiet. Grateful for crumbs. Willing to tolerate whatever mistreatment came my way. But I'd already lost them. I just hadn't faced it until now. I don't see them anyway, I said. You made sure of that. The psychiatrist tried again. Mrs. Patterson, it's not unusual for seniors to become suspicious, even paranoid. Sometimes they imagine betrayals that aren't there. Get off my property. They all started speaking at once, protests, denials, excuses, but I was done listening. 15 years of gaslighting. 15 years of being told I was too fragile, too forgetful, too irrational. Now they wanted to slap a diagnosis on me to keep the theft going, legally. Get off my property, I repeated, firmer now. Or I'll call the sheriff. That stopped them. They turned, heading back to their cars. But I heard Quinn's voice as he opened the door. She's lost it. We need to act fast before she does something irreversible. That evening, Margaret called. She had an update. Your son's attorney reached out, Margaret said. They're looking to settle. Settle? I asked. What kind of deal are they proposing? They're offering to return 60% of the original insurance payout. On top of that, they'll cover your living expenses here at the cabin for the rest of your life. Provided you agree to drop all charges and sign a non-disclosure agreement. I almost laughed. Even now, caught red-handed, they were still trying to manage me. They'd keep 40% of my money and tuck me away in this cabin like some family embarrassment they could pay off and forget. And what did you say to them? I asked. I told them we'd entertain the offer, if they returned 100% of the funds, paid 15 years of compounded interest, and compensated you for the financial abuse. I also made it clear the criminal case is not on the table for negotiation. And? They hung up on me. That night, I sat alone on the small porch, listening to the wind move through the pine trees, and felt something I hadn't known in decades. Peace. Not the fake kind I'd once clung to, the kind you perform to survive. This was real. Earned. Honest. A peace born of truth, of finally choosing myself and refusing to feel shame for it. My phone had been buzzing all day, calls from Quinn, Monica, unknown numbers I could only assume were other relatives roped in to guilt-trip me. I stopped answering long before sunset. Tomorrow, Margaret would file the paperwork that would shift everything. There'd be news stories, gossip, relatives picking sides. Quinn and Monica's perfect little world, built on theft, was about to collapse. And while I could have felt guilt over the disruption to the grandchildren's lives, I didn't. Because the most loving thing I could do for them now was teach them what their parents never did. That actions have consequences. That you can't build a future on someone else's suffering and expect it to last. The old Blanche, the woman who would have crumbled under the pressure, was long gone. She'd been buried beneath 15 years of gaslighting, guilt, and silence. In her place stood someone far stronger, and far less afraid. 6 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of my new home, a warm, welcoming ranch house with a garden I'd dreamed about for 20 years, preparing dinner for people who actually enjoyed being around me. Laughter spilled from the living room. My new friend Helen was showing vacation photos from our trip to Ireland to my neighbor Dorothy and her teenage granddaughter. Ireland. Robert and I used to talk about going. It was a shared dream. But every time I mentioned it after he passed, Quinn would scoff and remind me to be realistic about finances. Now I understood. He'd been funding his European vacations with my money, while telling me I couldn't afford a weekend away. The doorbell rang. I dried my hands on a kitchen towel, smiling. That would be Margaret. My lawyer-turned-friend. She insisted on bringing dessert for tonight's little celebration. As I walked to the front door, I passed a framed article on my hallway table. Local woman recovers $12 million in landmark elder abuse case. The photo showed me standing in front of the courthouse, not smiling, but solid. Dignified. I didn't display it to boast. It was there to remind me of everything I'd come through. The criminal trial had wrapped up the week before. Quinn had pleaded guilty to fraud and elder abuse, cutting a deal to avoid a long prison sentence. He was given 2 years in county jail, 5 years probation, and ordered to pay full restitution. The civil case had settled months earlier. I'd recovered not just the $450,000 life insurance payout, but all 15 years of interest and additional damages for emotional and financial distress. Margaret walked in, holding a homemade apple pie, her face bright and proud. "How are you feeling about it all?" she asked. "Free," I said. And I was. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't waking up weighed down by fear over bills or medical expenses. I could afford my prescriptions, routine checkups, and even the occasional indulgence, like fresh flowers for the dining room or art supplies for my weekend classes. I'd bought a reliable car. Signed up for a book club. Started watercolor painting again. I was finally living the life Robert had imagined for me when he'd taken out that policy. The house had been my first real purchase after the settlement. Nothing extravagant, just cozy and mine. The garden out back was already thriving, tomatoes, herbs, wildflowers I tended every morning with coffee in hand, no longer rushing out the door to work some dead-end job to survive on what Quinn decided I deserved. As Margaret and I joined the others in the living room, she asked quietly, "Any word from Quinn?" I shook my head. He was serving time at the local jail. I hadn't visited. Monica had filed for divorce 3 months ago and moved with the kids back to her mother's ranch in another state. She kept a few assets, claiming ignorance of the fraud, though the emails I'd uncovered painted a different picture. The grandchildren I was barely allowed to know were gone too. But I'd come to terms with that. They had been Monica's leverage, just as my poverty had been Quinn's tool for control. Some battles, I'd learned, weren't worth picking back up. Margaret looked at me gently. "He's been asking to see you. At least, that's what I've heard." "Let him ask," I said. Helen glanced up from her photo album. "You don't feel any obligation?" "He's still your son." It was a fair question. One I'd asked myself in the quiet, guilt-ridden hours of sleepless nights. "The boy I raised," I said slowly, "disappeared somewhere along the line. The man sitting in that cell is a stranger who convinced himself that stealing from me was somehow an act of love." Dorothy, 82 and fierce, nodded. "Some folks mistake kindness for weakness," she said. "Sounds like your son figured out too late just how strong his mother really was." That evening, we looked through photos of my Ireland trip, made plans for an Alaskan cruise next spring, and chatted about the art class I'd just signed up for at the community college. Simple joys. The kind that were impossible when I was scraping by on the scraps Quinn left me, while he lived large and told himself I was being cared for. Now, I didn't just have my life back. I had more than I ever imagined was still waiting for me. After everyone left, I settled into my favorite chair with a warm mug of tea and glanced around the living room. The mantel held family photos, but they told a new story now. Images of Robert and me in our younger days. Smiling snapshots with friends I'd made over the last few months. Pictures from trips I'd once only dreamed about. Gone were the endless framed awards and newspaper clippings about Quinn, the shrine that used to dominate the walls of my old apartment. In their place was evidence of my own life. My journey. My joy. The phone rang, and instinctively, my chest tightened, an old reflex I hadn't quite shaken. But it was only Helen, calling to thank me for dinner and confirm our plans for the farmer's market in the morning. "You know," she said before hanging up, "I'm so glad we met in that art class. You've become such a dear friend." A friend. Not someone enduring me out of family duty or pity, but someone who actually enjoyed being with me. It had taken me 66 years to understand the difference. Later that night, as I got ready for bed, I thought of the woman I'd been 6 months earlier. Standing in a tiny cabin, heartbroken at the gap between a $30,000 fixer-upper and a $200,000 dream home. She'd felt discarded, irrelevant, and grateful for the smallest scrap of attention from a son who treated her like an inconvenience. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone who knew her value, and who finally demanded to be treated accordingly. The next morning, as I was tending to the tomatoes in my garden, a car pulled into the driveway. A young woman stepped out, mid-20s, with Quinn's eyes and Monica's stubborn jawline. It took a moment, but then I recognized her. Emma. My granddaughter. Grown now, and beautiful. Grandma Blanche? Her voice wavered, uncertain. I set down the watering can and took a good look at her. No designer clothes, no flashy accessories, just jeans and a plain t-shirt. Her car was modest, practical. Whatever comfort Quinn had built from my stolen money was clearly gone. Emma. I didn't rush into her arms. Didn't pretend that time hadn't passed or that damage hadn't been done. We both knew this wouldn't be easy. "I wanted to see you," she said, glancing around at the house, the flowers, the quiet little life I'd built. "This is really nice." "Thank you." A beat of silence hung between us. Then she spoke again. "Mom told me about everything. About Dad. The money. All of it." Her voice had a tremble, still young, still trying to make sense of things. "I didn't know," she said. "She's been saying you were bitter. That you destroyed the family over money." Emma met my eyes. "But that's not what the article said. That's not what the court record showed." Smart girl. She'd done her homework. She hadn't just swallowed the version her mother fed her. "And what do you think?" I asked. Emma looked down at the tomato plants, lips pressed tight in thought. "I think Dad lied to a lot of people. I think maybe the life we were living wasn't real. And we just didn't know it. But now you do." She nodded slowly, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "It's all gone. The house. My school. Tyler's little league team. Mom blames you for everything, but if Dad hadn't stolen from you, none of this would have happened." "That's right." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry we barely knew you. I'm sorry Dad kept us away. I'm sorry for all of it." I studied her carefully. There was no manipulation in her eyes, no agenda, no performance. Just regret. And a desire to understand. "What is it you want from me, Emma?" She straightened a bit. "Nothing," she said quickly. I wanted you to know that not everyone believed the lies. And I hoped, maybe, I could get to know you. The real you. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It wasn't a storybook reunion, either. But it was honest. And that, in this family, was a rare and precious thing. "Would you like some iced tea?" I asked. We sat on the back porch and talked for hours. She told me about her college classes, about picking up shifts to help pay tuition now that the safety net was gone. She asked about Robert. About my childhood. About the version of me she never got the chance to meet, before I was reduced to a footnote in Quinn's carefully managed narrative. When it was time for her to leave, she didn't ask for anything. She didn't make promises or offer reassurances. She simply hugged me, gently, sincerely, and said, "Thank you for not giving up on yourself." That evening, I sat in my garden as the last light of day slipped behind the trees I'd planted with my own hands. The phone didn't ring with pleas from Quinn. There were no overdue bills waiting in the mailbox. And my calendar was full, not of obligations, but of plans I'd made. By choice. Trips on the horizon. Art classes. Book clubs. Meals shared with people who saw my worth. Robert's life insurance had finally served its true purpose. Not to pad Quinn's bank account, but to give me freedom, peace, and dignity. Not to support a son who treated me like a problem to solve, but to uplift the woman he loved. I pulled out my phone and reread Margaret's most recent message. Quinn's lawyer called again. He wants to meet once he's released. I typed back. Still no. And put the phone down. I typed a single word, no. Then I erased Quinn's number from my phone, completely. Some bonds can't be mended. Some trust, once shattered, doesn't come back, no matter how much you want it to. But that doesn't mean you can't start over. Doesn't mean you can't build something better. I was 66 years old, and for the first time in decades, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Free. Proud. Finally living the life I should have had all along. The version of me who accepted crumbs and apologized just for taking up space. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood her value. And wasn't about to settle again. It took me 66 years to figure that out. But it's never too late to choose yourself. Now I'm wondering about you, the person hearing this. What would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever faced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear them. And while you're here, I've linked 2 more stories on the screen, favorites from the channel that just might surprise you. Thank you for staying with me all the way through. It means more than you know.